What is up, everyone? It is David Mailer here, the Man on Fire mentor. And today I want to dive into the center of the fire with each and every one of you and talk about a topic that comes up for so many men. I've had the privilege and the honor of coaching over 10,000 men in the past 10 plus years. And one of the things that depletes a man of his power is when he is pointing his finger outward and thinking that his life is the way it is, his relationship is the way it is because of the person, the other person, because of something outside of himself. So I'll hear things like, David, if she would just listen to me, if she would just forgive me, if she would just take down her walls, if she would just let me back into her heart, if she would just stop drinking, if she would just do therapy with me, if she would just give me another chance, if she would just see that I'm making the changes now and let me back into her heart. And so what ends up happening is that inadvertently, and for many of you, maybe subconsciously, you're sourcing your life and where you're at in your life. You're blaming it on something or someone outside of you. And in a world of blame and in a world of fault, you as a man will be drained of your power and you will never be able to take what's called ownership or responsibility over your life. And most of us, most of humanity sadly resides at a lower level of awareness, a lower frequency, a lower consciousness. So we're either in a space of suffering where it's helpless and it's hopeless and there's nothing that I can do, or we go into a place of the next evolution of our consciousness is we go into a space of polarity where we're either looking for the magical fix, potion, lotion, genie, solution, something outside of ourselves that's going to save us, or we're naming, blaming, shaming, judging, and projecting and pointing our finger outward. And as you guys know, when one finger's pointing out, there's always three pointing back at yourself. And some of us are lucky enough to get to a place where we realize we're stuck. We keep repeating this pattern over and over and over again, and we're the common denominator. And it can't just be the three women. It can't just be the three bosses or businesses that failed, that it's their fault. My God, I must have to look in the mirror more intimately and closely and recognize I'm the common denominator here. So you realize you're stuck. And so many of us are not able to, when we're stuck, get enough emotional leverage to then go into the next level of awareness and consciousness, which is called enough, where you say enough of blaming things outside of myself, enough of abdicating my leadership, enough of thinking my life is the way it is because of something outside of me, enough of playing small, enough of dropping my standard, enough of living less than who I was made to be. There's not a lot of guys, sadly, that actually get to this place. And I don't say that as a judgment. I say that as a pain point because this is what motivates me to want to support more men and help more men and hold more men accountable to recognizing your life really doesn't begin until you get to a place of what's called stage 4 consciousness, as developed by Donald Epstein, where you are personally taking responsibility for your life. And you realize that if you're in a relationship and you don't like what's happening in the relationship, you stop pointing your finger outward. Now, does this mean that the woman that you're with, or for some men, the men that you're with, does it mean that they don't at some point have to take some form of ownership or responsibility for what's happening in the relationship? No, it doesn't mean that at all. But if you are the one that wants to have a change in your life and you're the one that's signing up for growth, then you're the one that has to go first and you're the one that has to make these changes. And for some of you, you might recognize when you get to a place of growth, you might realize that the person you're with, maybe that shouldn't be the person you're with, in which case you would end the relationship with grace and with dignity, with love and with respect. More often than not, that's not the case. More often than not, the men that originally come to us, they think that they're not the problem. They think that she's the problem. And they think that if she would just change, if she would just do all these things, if she would just listen to me, if she would just let me back in, if she would just give me another chance, then everything will be okay. And the reality is no, it won't. And the reason that it won't is because you haven't changed. And you will perpetuate this cycle. You'll perpetuate this pattern. You'll be the hamster on the wheel. And you'll recreate exactly what happened before until you've made the decision. You've put the sword in the ground, you've drawn a line in the sand, and you're like, no more going back to the old life. No more going back to the old me. No more selling myself short. Otherwise, you'll repeat the pattern over and over again. So for a lot of the guys that are out there, oh, I just want another chance. I just want her to let me back into her life. Like, but if you haven't done the internal work, if you haven't grown yourself as a man, you'll repeat the same mistakes. You'll still get agitated. You'll still blow your top. You'll still yell at her. You'll still be sharp with your tongue. Some of you sadly get physical, which we will never, ever, ever support in the Man on Fire community. Some of you get emotionally and mentally abusive because you're covering up, feelings inside where you might feel inadequate or like less than or not good enough. And so you get sharp with your tongue. And you think that if she took you back or if you guys had another chance, everything would be okay. And the reality is no, well, because you didn't do the work yet. And if you didn't do the work, you'll recreate the same scenario. So this is a call to action for all men who have been following me for a while to recognize that you have to stop blaming your partner. Well, David, but what if she's the one that cheated? How could I not blame her? How could I not fault her? Well, if you've been following me long enough, then you've heard my story, right? 15 years ago, the woman that I was with had an affair. She was my wife. And there's not one part of me that blames her. There's not one part of me that thinks that it's her fault as to why the marriage ended. Because I'm in a place of my life where I take full ownership and full responsibility for my life. Everything that shows up in my life is because of me and me alone. The movie that I watch that I call my life is only the movie that I'm watching in relationship to what I'm projecting out there, meaning what I'm like a movie camera projecting a movie into the field that I'm watching. And the only way for me to see a different movie is I have to change the projector. I have to change me. I have to vibrationally grow. I have to up-level my consciousness if I want to watch a different movie, if I want to participate in a different movie. So, well, how is it then you could take responsibility if your wife had an affair? How is that possible? Well, because you would have to, first of all, give up blaming and give up fault. You would have to recognize that blame and fault live at a very low tier of consciousness. It's only, it's an unconscious means of you temporarily trying to feel better about yourself, cover up your own inadequacies, ineptitude, feeling insecure, not good enough, unworthy, unlovable. And no one will ever win in a world of blame and fault because there's no level of ownership. There's no level of personal responsibility. And in the Man on Fire world, we as men take full ownership and full responsibility that everything that is showing up in my life, I created it. On an energetic level, I created it. Okay. So now let's come back to the example that I've given many times about the affair that my wife 15 years ago that I was married to had. I don't blame her. I don't fault her. I take full ownership and responsibility for how I created that. Well, how did I create that? Well, I took a look at, well, where was I not showing up as the man that she married, right? A woman too often will marry a man for his potential. How many of us are getting to our potential, like a Darryl Strawberry, that played for the Mets, or Dwight Gooden? Unfortunately, drugs got the best of them. They have all this potential, but did they live into the potential? And more often than not, most of us don't leave it all on the table. Most of us don't leave it down on the field. And sadly, a lot of us bow out where our last breath is one of regret. So how is it that I can take responsibility for what I created in my previous marriage? And it's simple. It's looking at, where did I sell her short of the guy that she married? Where did I sell her short in how I was crushing it in business? Where did I sell her short in how I was showing up for her on a daily basis? Where did I sell her short on where I was leaking my energy? Was I really all in? Did I flirt with other girls? Did I flirt with some of her friends? Did I think about other women masturbating? I mean, you got to look at all of these things and recognize that if I did all these things, if I was leaking my energy, flirted with the waitress, flirted with her friends, thought about another girl when I was pleasuring myself, like, how can that not contribute to the person that you're in relationship with? How can it not contribute to the behaviors that show up for them? Now, does that mean that she at some point didn't need to take ownership and responsibility? Could she have chosen differently? Could she have chosen to talk to me and say, hey, I don't feel like you're all in. I don't feel all of your energy is invested in this relationship. What's going on? I need to feel more seen by you, more claimed by you, more heard by you. Of course, she could have done that, but she wasn't there in her, emotional and spiritual development to have that languaging. Plus, I might have been too immature to actually even handle those words, and maybe I would have just put the blame back on her. So the Man on Fire takes full ownership and full responsibility for what he created in his life. And when you approach this where you're not pointing your finger outward, you're not abdicating your leadership. You're not thinking that your life is the way it is because of something or someone outside of yourself. That's when you start to have true power. And I recognize that if I had showed up differently in my previous marriage 15 years ago, the outcome would have been different and the affair never would have happened. And again, I'm not excusing her actions. There were other ways that she could have handled it, but there's not one part of me that blames her. There's not one part of me that faults her. I only have love for my ex-wife. She's a phenomenal and an amazing woman. And to this day, we have a beautiful relationship where we care about each other deeply. I'm still, in her life, care about her family tremendously. And it was a beautiful learning and growing experience as a man to no longer have to point your finger and think that this happened because of what she did. No, it happened because of how I was showing up in my life, in that relationship, and in other areas of my life. And so for the men listening today, what I'm asking you to do is to start taking full ownership and full responsibility for whatever in your life you would love to see change. Stop giving your power away. Stop abdicating your leadership. Stop pointing your finger at her and say, oh, if she would just soften, if she would just let down her walls, if she would just open up to me again, if she would just give me another chance, if she would. You saying that doesn't help you. Change it to if I would, and then change that to I'm committed to. So if she's not letting down her walls and she's not softening, guess what? You're not in your power. Guess what? You're not in your manhood. Guess what? You're not in your masculine leadership. Guess what? She doesn't trust you. So you're the one that has to work on you, and you're the one that has to up-level your leadership. You're the one that has to up-level your masculine presence. You're the one that has to up-level your ability to be fully trusted where she can feel safe. And then I promise you, the walls will come down. And if they don't come down, then you might get to a place at least where you recognize, you know what, I deserve more than this. And you're not pointing your finger. You're not blaming your partner. You don't have venom, and you're not faulting her, and you could walk away, head held up high in your heart, in your power, saying this relationship doesn't serve me. Men bail way too prematurely. They still want to point their finger. They still want to think it's her fault. And you miss the opportunity to do the deeper internal work, to grow yourself as a man where you have more awareness and more understanding that I created this. In fact, it's your soul and its requirement to grow that called this in. Right? You guys, most of you just want out of this problem. Oh, I just want this headache to go away. Oh, I just want this problem to go away. Oh, I just want her to trust me again. And the reality is your soul called it in so that you can grow as a man. And most men, or at least a lot of them out there, they don't want to do the work. They don't want to grow. They don't want to do what's required in order to actually grow. And for the guy listening right now that needed to hear this, your life begins at the end of your comfort zone. Your life begins when you decide to finally grow yourself. And your life begins when you decide to no longer abdicate your leadership and recognize that everything that's happening in your life is a relationship to who you are, because you are the movie, and what you're watching happen in your life is because you're projecting it into the field. And this life that you call, or a movie that you call your life, if you want to watch a different movie, you, sir, have to make the changes. And here's the good news. Each and every one of you are fully capable of this. Each and every one of you were born to be a leader. Each and every one of you, can come back into the remembrance of how powerful you truly are. No matter how lost you've been, no matter how long it's been that you haven't really stepped into the fullness of who God made you to be, every single one of you is absolutely capable of living a phenomenal and extraordinary life. And you think it's about just getting rid of these problems, these headaches. Like, no, this is a call to action for you to rise into a better version of yourself, for you to rise into being a more congruent and more coherent version of you, because that's who you are. And whatever's showing up in your life is a reminder when you're out of sync, when you're out of alignment with the real version of you. Guys, I so believe in you. I love each and every one of you. Here's to you, rising with more passion, with more power and more purpose. No more giving away your leadership. No more abdicating it. No more pointing your finger. It's time to look in the mirror and recognize, if I want a different life, it starts with me and my growth. You got this. I love you guys. Bye for now.